Day one of owning Twitter and the hate speech concerns already start. I'm waiting for all of the harassment claims and the Me Too claims and everything else that is going to be coming down the pike. I'm sure of it. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's Tuesday. My name's Robert Gouveia. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we've got some headlines to attend to. We're, of course, going to clean up some of the leftovers from the Elon buying Twitter saga that really hit the climax yesterday. We're going to see what Trump said about it, some follow-up there. Jeff Bezos is out throwing some serious shade on Elon in this acquisition. We'll hear from him. We'll take a look at some of Bezos's other connections to China because he is not without problems himself. We're going to check in on the border. We've got a judge granting a temporary injunction stopping the Biden administration from wrecking the border even further. We're going to check out what the White House is doing with Russia, Ukraine. They have appointed a new ambassador, sort of normalizing relationships with Ukraine now that the war is sort of permanent. I think it's going to be a feature that we're living with for a long time. We're going to need an ambassador over there as we continue to funnel millions of dollars, billions of dollars. We got to make sure it's landing in somebody's lap. So, of course, we're going to look at that. We've got interesting clips from the Pennsylvania Senate debate last night. And then we'll take a look at some locals' comments, questions, YouTube member, supporter comments, questions. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the work that we do here. Starting off the news, of course, is Reuters, the headline: human rights groups raise hate speech concerns after Elon Musk takes over Twitter. And we're going to see a lot of this. Musk, who is the free speech absolutist self-described, is now going to be creating a free speech platform, saying this is a bedrock of a functioning democracy. Twitter is not just another company, though. According to human rights advocates, it's special, it's sacred, it's the golden calf that endures, that constantly promotes and promises democratic victories. They're not happy that they're going to lose this. Somebody says, regardless of who owns Twitter, the company has human rights responsibilities to respect the rights of people around the world who rely on the platform. Changes to its policies, features, and algorithms, big and small, can have disproportionate and sometimes devastating impacts, including offline violence, says Deborah Brown, digital rights researcher over there at Human Rights Watch. Now, I don't actually disagree with her on this. I think that it is very important. I think that Twitter is and has become the town square, just like Elon Musk has said. And many, many months, maybe years ago now, I did a video on this channel talking about a digital bill of rights, explaining that there was no other place to have these conversations but on the internet. I was outraged that in America, the freedom of speech that is guaranteed in the First Amendment was being outsourced. We were sort of creating exceptions to that protection by saying, well, we're not actually censoring speech. It's not the government. We're not infringing on the First Amendment, but we're allowing Twitter to do it, or Facebook to do it, or Google to do it, and we're okay with that. And the concept was, no, we're not. That's where the conversations are happening, and we should have a base standard in this country, and it should absolutely start at speech. So I was outraged about it. I don't disagree that these conversations are very important, but what we have been seeing on Twitter, in my opinion, it's not even an opinion, it's obvious, has been extremely one-sided. They've been using it to eliminate their political enemies. And so my question, of course, for Deborah, if we were having a conversation, would say, well, do you think that those problems or these concerns were problems before Elon bought it? Because if her answer is no, well, my question would be, there were a lot of people who were relying on the platform to get information from their president, Donald Trump at the time, 80-something million people, maybe more than that, I don't remember. But they lost that access because Twitter decided their human rights to have knowledge from the elected president whom they voted for is not apparently important. So we're going to see a lot more of this. Somebody else saying freedom of expression is not an absolute right. You have to do and express yourselves how we say, which is why Twitter needs to invest in efforts to keep its vulnerable users safe on the platform. And look, I don't necessarily disagree that there are some facets, you could have kids or something getting access to data or, seeing things that maybe they shouldn't be seeing. But that's not what we have been talking about here with Twitter. It has largely been about hate speech and misinformation and disinformation. And the people who want to control the conversations, they conveniently have the power to classify what is misinformation and disinformation, what's offensive, what's hate speech, what's appropriate or not. If you don't use the correct labels on certain, things that are taking place, conversations that are happening, You are now a bigot who should be banned for harassment and thrown off the internet. Twitter did not respond for a comment. Somebody writes, while Elon is an ACLU card-carrying member and one of the most significant supporters, there's a lot of danger having so much power in the hands of any one individual, says somebody from the ACLU. And it's like, where were you, Anthony Romero, on Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos buying Washington Post? Somebody else from Amnesty International said, the last thing we need is Twitter that willfully turns a blind eye to violent and abusive speech against its users. What does that even mean? Violent speech and abusive speech against users, particularly those like women, non-binary persons, and others. So I guess everything just has to be bubble wrapped. If you can't deal with that speech, in my opinion, don't get on the platform. If you want to get out there and post something on Twitter and you say, hey, this is my opinion, and somebody says, well, I think you're a moron for that ridiculous opinion, that's on you for jumping on the platform and engaging in the conversation. If you're not capable of handling that feedback or that criticism or that abuse or that violence, if it breaks the law, that's a whole separate concept. But if it's, I don't know what she's talking about. What is violent speech? If it's actively advocating for, the murder of somebody, that's a crime. But what we're talking about is what they categorize through their own criteria, violent and abusive speech. If you can't handle it, get off the platform. So now that we've got a big change, of course, people wondering, is Donald Trump coming back? We see here from Fox News. No, doesn't sound like it, but we'll see. Trump will not return to Twitter, even as Elon purchases the platform. Trump was out. He says on Monday afternoon, we learned that Twitter, of course, was purchased. Former president told Fox News on Monday that he will formally join Truth Social over the next 7 days as planned, which is very curious. I believe I have an account on Truth Social, but since I don't use iPhones or iPads regularly, I don't get on there. But they are working hard. Trump says, I am not going to Twitter. I'm going to be staying on Truth. I hope Elon buys Twitter. He'll make improvements to it. He is a good man, but I'm going to be staying on Truth. Told Fox News he's going to be truthing over the next week. Trump media technology group Truth Social, formally launched last month, had a little bit of a bumpy rollout, beta testing. They just switched over to Rumble Cloud platform, apparently. And so my understanding is all of the users who are on the wait list are all now on the platform. For me, it's a problem because there's no Android or even web support, so you can't get on there if you're not using iPhone devices, Apple devices regularly. Trump says, I think it's good. We want liberty and justice and fairness in our country, and the more we can have, the better. But no, I don't view it as competition for what I am doing. He says, this is a platform for my voice. Truth is a platform for my voice and my supporters, but I want everybody to come over to Truth, conservatives, liberals, whatever. Former president said, Twitter became very boring because conservatives were thrown off or got off the platform after I left. And he's not wrong about it. It did get a little bit more boring. And a lot of people were like, well, gosh, I'm so relieved. No more mean tweets. And you're going, was that really like the biggest problem of your day? Seeing Donald Trump post something? Get a life. It became boring because there was no interaction, Trump said. The interaction on Truth has been amazing. We want everybody. He says it's going to be a voice for me. On Monday, Musk tweeted, yeah, I hope that even my worst critics remain on Twitter because that's what free speech means. True Social CEO Devin Nunes told Fox News that True Social has an uncancelable architecture now that is working flawlessly and lightning quick. So I do like that. That sounds very interesting because we saw what happened with Parler and some of the other platforms when Amazon, which is run by Bezos, which is another billionaire, decided to eliminate a political enemy. Speaking of Jeff Bezos, here he is. He posted this right after the Elon purchase, and he's responding to somebody named Mike Forsyth. Says, and he is a New York Times reporter, which is very convenient. He had this interesting question. He says, Elon just purchased Twitter. I'm very unhappy about this. Writes, appropriate to something, says Tesla's second biggest market in 2021 was China after the US. Chinese battery makers are major suppliers for Tesla's EVs. See what he's saying? Implying that Elon is beholden to China, second biggest market. After all, he's not going to anger the second big market. He also doesn't even care just about the market, but he actually needs them for his US market. Yes, he's concerned about losing the Chinese market, but if he doesn't have batteries, he can't even effectuate the US market. Big problem. And he says after 2009, China had no leverage over Twitter. They have been removed because they banned it as a platform. But he says that may have just changed. Elon now has a lot of leverage over Twitter. And guess who has leverage over Elon, according to Mike? China. And Bezos is in agreement with that. He gives us the old boost on the Twitter. Elon's Twitter, by the way, says, interesting question. Did the Chinese government just gain a bit of leverage over the town square? Jeff. These two are at each other. Jeff and Elon, they have their space race going on, and Jeff is not really keeping pace as far as I can tell. And so he doesn't like this. He's kind of needling him a little bit. Not very appropriate, but it's just asking questions. He's playing that stupid shtick. It is an interesting question. I'm just curious what's happening here. Sure you are there, Jeff. He goes back down here and says, my own answer to this question is probably not. Well, why didn't you put that in the first tweet that got 24,000 likes versus this one that got 5,000 likes? Yeah, so that one got a lot more views and eyeballs than this one. My own answer is probably not. The more likely outcome in this regard is the complexity in China for Tesla rather than censorship at Twitter. So he's just asking questions. He says, well, we'll see. Musk is extremely good at navigating this kind of complexity. Oh, man. So Elon and Jeff, I don't think they're going to be going golfing anytime soon. They're not getting along too well. Meanwhile, we know that Bezos was partnered with Chinese propagandists. Remember when Xi Jinping wrote a book and published that, guess where that was being sold? On Amazon, the world's largest bookstore. Amazon was marketing a collection of his speeches and writings on its Chinese website about 2 years ago when Beijing sent a message to Jeff, according to two people familiar with the incident. American e-commerce giant must stop allowing customer ratings and reviews in China. A negative review of Xi's book prompted and demanded one of the people said, I think this issue was anything under 5 stars is a problem. Ratings and reviews, crucial part of the business, but Amazon complied, two people said. The government published book has no customer reviews or ratings, and the comment section is disabled. Just bowing to Chinese censors. Jumping over to the border, we see here a judge grants temporary order that blocks the Biden admin from lifting Title 42 before May 23rd, and they must be doing cartwheels over there at the White House. They have been wanting the courts to come and sort of save their butts on a lot of these terrible issues for them, and the courts just did it. Federal judge granted a temporary restraining order on Monday. Remember that Biden was going to be lifting Title 42, which was the public health order that allowed the government to expel migrants more quickly, and they want to pull this back. The order came out because it was COVID and pandemic and it was, madness. And they said, well, we need these special powers and these justifications. CDC back on April 1 said, now that Biden's in charge, we're going to terminate Title 42, saying the order suspending the right to introduce migrants into the United States is no longer necessary due to increased tools to fight COVID. So the same CDC that wants to make sure and is currently appealing the masks on airplanes ruling is now going to be saying, well, COVID's a real big problem on the airplanes, but not so big of a problem at the border. After all, nobody cares about the border. Here, Attorney General Eric Schmidt, breaking news in a lawsuit originally filed by Missouri. Temporary restraining order keeps 42 in place, originally filed in Missouri, Louisiana, and Arizona. Shout out. Border Patrol is already not using Title 42 to expel some immigrants. Where is Kamala Harris? Didn't she go down to Guatemala some time ago to solve this problem? Apparently hasn't been working. Mark Brnovich, Attorney General here from Arizona, said, we applaud the court for approving a temporary restraining order to keep Title 42 in place, and it is going to be a big problem, I think, in the coming months. Bill Malugin's on Twitter, and he's doing a great job reporting on a lot of the stuff that is taking place down here. You see a couple photographs. That was from some time ago down in Yuma. But yeah, it's continuing to heat up. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is very focused on other countries' borders, in particular Ukraine and Russia. You see that they are announcing plans to nominate an ambassador to Ukraine. Now that World War III is permanent, we're going to probably have another 20 years. We had 20-something years in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we'll probably have another 20, 30 years or so in Ukraine. Going to be fun. White House announces plans to nominate the ambassador to Ukraine. Her name is Bridget Brink, seen here, photograph. plans to tap her. She's the current ambassador to the Slovak Republic, serving the role. Veteran diplomat, 25 years experience. She has served in the State Department, ambassador all over the place. From Michigan, speaks Russian, and holds multiple advanced degrees. Got to go through Senate approval. She was confirmed by unanimous vote back in 2019. If confirmed, she is going to lead our diplomatic mission in Ukraine with dedication and distinction. Nomination came from Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Lloyd Austin. They're traveling around there over in Ukraine. State Department also announced that U.S. diplomats will be returning to Ukraine this week after leaving the country. Diplomats previously worked out of the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv. They're going to make their return to leave. The increased U.S. presence demonstrates our support for Ukraine, part of our U.S. commitment to return our diplomats. So, of course, they need infrastructure. I mean, they are literally funneling billions of dollars over there, hand over fist, as quickly as they can. Every couple days, Biden's like, we need more billions of dollars. And they just keep going, yeah, Congress, Republicans, and Democrats. Yeah, sounds good. Freedom, democracy. Let me just slap my Ukraine flag right on my forehead and just print more money out for you guys. That's going on. They need a receiving party. They need a group of people to take those billions of dollars and funnel them around where it needs to go. So they are installing those people as we speak. In Pennsylvania, we've got an interesting Senate race. The GOP had a debate last night. You can see a photograph here of Dr. Oz, Trump-endorsed candidate running for Senate there in Pennsylvania, and a number of other candidates. We've got a couple highlights here. We'll check this out. They were debating yesterday. Dr. Oz getting criticism for not even being from Pennsylvania, apparently. I don't follow this race too closely, but I am curious as to what's going on with Dr. Oz because of the prior statements he's made. We'll take a look at. But here's a couple clips from the debate.
They care much more about what I stand for than where I'm from.
When these carpetbaggers lose, you will never see them again.
President Trump saw right through him. He therefore did not endorse Mr. McCormick. He endorsed me.
And it's just disingenuous for Mehmet to say that when Mehmet has so many dollars coming in his pocket from China.
You've also
What did he call him?
been accused of flip-flopping on key conservative issues.
And I am pro-life. I've been very clear on my position throughout this race.
You can't save Main Street, Pennsylvania if you cannot find Main Street, Pennsylvania.
So I put my...
He's catching grief, right? So he's not even from there, apparently. Just moved over there, and they're giving him grief. He's a carpetbagger, saying he's just picking up his suitcase and coming here to run for a Senate seat that he thinks he can win. He doesn't care about you in Pennsylvania.
My track record with Pennsylvania and America up against anyone here.
Dishonest Dave is at it again.
And the problem, doctor, is there's no miracle cure for flip-flopping.
For your viewers who took my advice and played the drinking game about them talking about each other, they're already drunk.
He rejected you
Thank you,
twice
Ms. Barnett.
and
Thank
did not
you.
give you that
Ms.
advice.
Sands, have you discussed the 2020 election with former President Trump, and do you think it's time for the party to move on? You have 30 seconds, sir.
I have discussed with President Trump, and we cannot move on.
So we've had another flip-flop in the case of COVID by Mehmet.
Have you changed your position on COVID from the beginning of the pandemic to now?
No.
Oh, you haven't changed your opinion? Oh, well, I'm glad that I have this clip from you here. There, Dr. Oz, because here's what he said, according to Jack Posobiec. He came over from the Constitutionalist on Twitter, at Donnie the Don. Here's what he was able to dig up. This old clip from Dr. Oz that says, we have to copy what the CCP did. Love their brutal lockdowns. Take their blueprint and repeat it here in this country. And you remember what they were doing over there in China. Not good. And it's even worse now in Shanghai. But if Dr. Oz hasn't changed his opinion, well, what's this one say?
Able to do that. If you look inside of Wuhan province, they had a catastrophe. But outside the province, which of course they quarantined in the largest movement of its nature ever, 60 million people blocked in that space. But the rest of the country was relatively spared.
16 million people locked in space. Let's see.
They didn't have the big spikes, the huge crises that Wuhan experienced, and it took the country in a very different direction. We just have to copy what they did, take their blueprint and repeat it here in this country, and we started that aggressively over the last week.
Yeah, we did, and it was a disaster, and it wrecked so much of this country, and it wrecked people's lives and their minds, and it's going to have catastrophic consequences indefinitely. He's okay with that. He doesn't care about it. Probably doing cartwheels in his room, very excited about what they're doing in Shanghai, some doctor. So absolutely reprehensible opinion on that. He's doubling down on it, allegedly not even reversing course. Jumping over to locals, we've got three girlies in the house. Says, good for him on this comment. Florida sheriff's arrests daughter during a drug bust. Says, sheriff didn't protect her, treated her like the other person they arrested. Shows he has ethics and morals. Yeah, that's a good one. That's over from the Epoch Times. Yeah, that is interesting. You know, typically You don't see that in my experience. You often see this sort of blue shield, this blue coat of silence that exists amongst police and their kids and their friends and their family and everybody else. Three Girlies with another one says, this is about a Texas death row inmate, Melissa Lucio, granted a stay of execution, which is always good news. Let's see what happened here. Court of Appeals on Monday granted a stay of execution. Was set to be judicially killed on Wednesday. Death of one of 14 children, ordering a lower court to review new evidence. New evidence will prove her innocence in the death of her 2-year-old daughter. Appeals court ordered the lower court to reconsider the evidence that her attorney says shows her daughter died of an accidental fall. The appeals court ordered a lower court to reconsider the evidence that her attorney says shows her daughter died after an accidental falls down a flight of stairs, not because of child abuse. So they're continuing to work on that. Wow. 266-page petition. That is a big doozy of a petition. Let's take a look at this one just because I'm curious. Woo! Look at this table of contents. It's a novel, folks. It's a big one. All right. And so that is a good share over from Three Girlies. Thank you for that. Another one from Three Girlies talking about Jack Dorsey throwing his support behind Elon. And I was going to cover this, but I forgot to pull that one up. He did. Jack Dorsey had a sort of a tweet storm series, really throwing his support behind Elon. Says Elon's goal of creating the platform that is maximally trusted and broadly inclusive is the right one. And thank you both for getting the company out of a difficult situation. So yeah, it's very interesting to see the realignment taking place. Thank you, Heather, for that one. We've got Vientikist shared a link talking about George Friedman, talking about how the populace views the presidency about 11 minutes in. So that's over on YouTube. I'll invite you to go over that 26-minute video. George Friedman, Global Trends and Forecast for 2022. I like that. I'll have to watch that later. That sounds like an interesting one. Thank you, Vientikist. And also posting a Lion King meme, Simba. Ah. You can see here we've got Twitter being held up in front of the crying hyenas. Oh, it's too good. I love it. Absolutely amazing.
And you had
Three Girlies jumping in on the Depp versus Heard, saying this is a very weird case, which I have not been following at all. I mean, honestly, she streams every single day of the trial. The last time I looked, it was like a 10-hour stream. She's crushing it. She was on trending. And I mean, a lot of people are interested in this case, but I just can't bring myself to care all that much, honestly. But here says, have you heard of an attorney who objects to his own question? Didn't that happen in Liar Liar? Wasn't there Jim Carrey? Didn't he do that? Let's listen to this one.
interaction with Debbie Lloyd when you're in the house, correct?
Yes, briefly.
Okay. And isn't it true that in the entire time you were there, you were not informed as to what caused damage to Mr. Depp's finger on March 8th?
Objection, hearsay.
I'm asking what he wasn't told.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay.
You didn't know what could cause damage to Mr. Depp's hand while you were there on March 8th, correct?
Dr. Kipper told me he sustained an injury on one of his fingers.
Objection, hearsay.
Wait, you asked the question.
Oh.
Next.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
that's
said
weird.
An injury to his finger.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what that was about. I think he just had a malfunction.
Objection, hearsay. Caused damage to Mr. Depp's hand while you were there on March 8th, correct?
Dr. Kipper told me he sustained an injury on one of his fingers.
Objection, hearsay.
He just forgot what side he was on.
Next question.
Okay, you said he sustained an injury to his finger,
Yes,
but you don't know what caused the injury to his finger.
one of
correct?
his fingers.
Yikes.
But you don't know you don't know how his finger was injured,
I
correct?
don't think anybody mentioned it to me at that time.
Right, no one mentioned it to you at that time, correct?
I don't
Same objection, Your Honor,
recall.
hearsay.
Yeah, so I think he just sort of forgot what he was doing. He's in a line of questioning, and I think he was thinking that the other person was in a line of questioning. He just got on the wrong side. So yeah, a little strange. Sometimes what an attorney will do if you ask a bad question is you'll catch yourself and you won't object to yourself. Yeah, let me rephrase that. Withdrawn. Let me rephrase, and you'll correct it that way. But he, I think, just kind of forgot what side he was and used the wrong terminology. It happens, not something that is all that abnormal to get sort of tripped up in a line of questioning. Obviously, this trial is very long and it can be very exhausting. I think a lot of people forget for a lawyer, going to a trial is like sort of running a marathon, literally. And I've run marathons and I've done trials. It's a lot. It's sort of a marathon for the mind. You're sitting there and you've got to be hyper focused and you're sort of on edge. Your adrenaline is everything's kind of, level 10 because it's ultra high pressure. In this case, that's televised, being watched by hundreds of thousands of people every single day, watching Legal Bites and her views go through the roof and sort of, watching the interest on this. I am sure that these attorneys are feeling the pressure, no doubt about it. And it just goes on and on and on. And you can imagine waking up every day, going to trial. It's like running a marathon day after day after day. You got to be listening to everything and every word matters. And sometimes it's just a lot of pressure and you just get tripped up a little bit. So you can see that it's, a difficult position for him. Hopefully he's not too embarrassed about that and moves on. We have another one from Vientikis, says, I'm out of Twitter jail. In my appeal for the decision, I told them that if I'm going to teach them the English language, they're going to pay money. That's from Vientikis. And so he's back on Twitter, which is very good news. Good to see you there, V. And then a couple from yesterday. Yesterday, I had a headline show prepared. I actually recorded it. I had to run into the office and I was going to post it at about 12 or 1 o'clock. Well, what happened is there was new news on Elon that came out at about 12 or 1 o'clock that the deal was going through. And basically the entire headline show was moot at that point. So I didn't post it, but I did do a show, and I apologize for those of you who were expecting that. But it just was kind of moot and the whole thing didn't make sense by the time I was going to post it. But I'm going to solve that problem the next go round. But we did post a couple stories. Grouchy Old Cat Ladies here says, not so much about Ukraine, but how our tax dollars are being spent and how much Ukraine is costing us. Not to mention inflation is a tax on everyone, right? And food is going to go up. We're going to see massive food shortages all around the world, which means that prices are going to go up. Supply and demand, pretty simple concept there. And I think that a lot of those will not be felt for many, many months, if not even 18 months. Some people are speculating by the time, the full sort of planting season and all of the, crop growth yields are all factored into the analysis. It'll be interesting to continue to follow. But in addition, this is in addition to the billions of dollars that they're just carting over there on U-Hauls, apparently. Three Girlies talks about the court blocking Title 42. We got that one. Former LEO's in the house. Says, when is it going to be safe to sign up for Twitter? I think it's safe now. It's Elon's now. Chris Wallace says, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing now that CNN Plus has become a complete catastrophe. Poor Chris Wallace. What's it going to do? I don't know. Vientika says, Canada has run towards fascism faster than a fat kid with a superhuman speed run to a candy store. Anyone seen a candy store lately? Yeah, look, Canada turned into Trudeau's dictatorship some time ago after the Freedom Convoy, and they're still having to recuperate from that. Tweaks here talking about some stuff on a 2000 Mules trailer. I've not heard about that one. Looks like it's a movie that is coming out over on Rumble, so check that one out. Grouchy Old Cat Ladies here says, maybe the U.S. should start dropping flyers in those Latin American countries to counteract misinformation. They are paying $8 to 20 grand each to smugglers, cartels. I saw another headline. Look at this, right? I saw another headline saying that there was, sort of all sorts of criminality and massive sort of numbers being reported, showing exactly the horrendous experiences that these people are being forced to go through as a result of inept U.S. policies. Like I've always said, if there are incentives to cause people to come across the border, then they will follow those incentives. And that's what the Biden administration has been creating and removing disincentives. It's not a good situation. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Body of missing Texas National Guard soldier found. That's terrible. I didn't know it was a Texas National Guard who actually had passed away. That's awful. So here's a photograph. Evans is the name, and rest in peace. Thoughts and prayers to this individual's family. Bishop E. Evans went missing after attempting to save 2 migrants from drowning. So there are consequences on the other side as well. Horrible stuff. Mr. MVP is talking about, here's the full list of the famous Johns who were in the Larry Ray cult case. Ooh, that's going to be a fun one to dig into. A couple more from Mr. MVP. Vientikis talking about cyber attacks. Jumping over to YouTube, we've got some member comments. Thank you, everybody, for your support here. We can see that cool guy, 18,000's in the house, responding to the Elon Musk Twitter takeover reactions video, which was fun, where I went through some of the Twitter employees' reactions on Twitter. That was a good time. God bless Elon Musk from Cool Guy. Bonnie Speck also responding to the Sussman video, where I think I've got another one queued up on that one today. Hopefully I can get to it. It should be a good one. There's a bunch of emails and stuff. Sussman is coming up for trial very soon. Bonnie says, in other words, judge has defined what's inside the hula hoop. That's right. There was a conversation about sort of the scope of the argument and what we can talk about. What's our business? What's not our business? And inside the hula hoop is two things now: data and witness testimony from FBI Special Agent David Martin. To a limited extent, though. He can't just get out there and talk about whatever he wants. It's got to be sort of narrowly tailored and relevant to the actual lie that Sussman proffered forward when he was meeting with the FBI. Bonnie Speck says, did you fall in love and decide to practice a little anti-fragile lifestyle? Missed your daily update. That was yesterday. I did miss it, and I do regret it. It was not something that I was planning for. I actually did record a little bit, but then Elon bought Twitter and the whole world shifted. Bonnie Speck says, what's wrong with being cooperative with the police? Going back on an old episode. Personally, I'd say okay and leave it at that, then go on and do what I want. Man, that was on an old one. Episode 8 of Watching the Watchers Live. Good Alistair, bad Alistair. That was talking about a Maricopa County attorney candidate, I believe. Interview with another candidate who ran for office. That's when I was doing a little bit of local interviews back during an election. So maybe I should do some more of that. But that was Bonnie Speck says, love you started out waiting for the gym question. I felt the way here after the CDC guidelines recommended gyms could open in phase 1. I drove 2,700 miles to find a pool open and stayed there until I opened our pools and gyms. I was very, very upset that they were closing the gyms and closing everything. I was extremely upset about that. And I made note of that in some of those early episodes. It's funny. Bonnie Speck says, 100% agree with you. No need to fuel the fire responding to the George Floyd protesters. Bonnie's going back into the archives. We have Danielle DeFries here. Says, dad, husband, sports fan. Talking about the ATF director, which was an interesting story that I think a lot of people kind of glossed over, at least in the media. There was, Steve, who got the replacement position over at the ATF. Marvin Richardson got demoted. ATF director, now Steve Stackelbach, something like that. We'll see what he does, but this could be a pretty serious change. We know that the Biden administration is making a big, effort to, deal with guns and all of this. So that'll be interesting. Bonnie Speck, yesterday was saying, decided to go down a rabbit hole down memory lane. We need more people like Andre Norman in the inner city neighborhoods, which is absolutely true. Andre Norman is an amazing guy. He wrote a book called Ambassador of Hope, and he was he's an ex-convict. He was in prison for murder, I believe, and then got out and has been changing lives ever since. I did interview him some time ago. Amazing guy. Gail Rosenthal says, thank you for the truth, Robert. Obama is a mouthpiece for Michelle to run for president. He couldn't govern. All he could do was pass executive orders that were overturned by SCOTUS, and he was a lecturer in con law. The man is dangerous to the country. The man who is dangerous to the country is the man who makes end runs around the legislative process like Obama did. Steve Bannon just has speech. Barack Obama abused his power and his office. Another one from Gail says, Rob, one of the most damaging actions that Obama and Kerry took in the final days was to not veto a UN resolution 2334, which I am not familiar with, says that it has something to do with countries and different populations living in different areas. Don't know if you're into this kind of material. Would love to see if you could put your technical methods to cover this topic. And I actually don't know much about any of this, to be honest. I don't spend a whole lot of time really sort of dissecting foreign policy. I try to keep stuff as best I can limited to police, politicians, prosecutors, and judges, sort of the criminal law, political realm. But from time to time, we do have to dig into foreign policy. We've talked some about Ukraine, and of course, a lot of that is political and kind of falls under that umbrella. So I'll have to take a look at that. Thank you, Gail Rosenthal, for the suggestion. Zulu's in the house responding to the Disney short that I posted on YouTube. Says, let the markets sort it out. Redirect your funds to the ARK encounter, but make sure to stay triggered about what Disney chooses to do with itself. I'm not particularly triggered about Disney one way or the other, but I don't know what the ARK encounter is. I don't know what that is. I'll have to take a look at that. Thanks, Zulu. Good to see you again. Deborah Yunker says, Rob, you were on fire. Keep the content coming. You're my #1 channel. Do you ever sleep? And I do sleep. I try to get good hours of sleep. Doesn't always work out for me, but I did sleep on Sunday. Deborah Yunker also says, none of these issues are going to get addressed until the next Congress session because it's going to be Republican. Let's hope the GOP has enough backbone to get it done. That was a comment on the Hunter Biden video where we saw that there was White House meetings taking place between Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Eric Sherwin, who was a partner of Hunter Biden's when they formed Rosemont Seneca Partners. Road Trek Girl says, great content as always. I can always depend on you to provide insightful analysis. Mark Elias, according to Road Trek Girl, not a good person. They're doing this all over the country with populist incumbents. Thank you for covering this. That was in response to the Biggs and Gosar election. What Road Trek Girl is talking about, Democrats have been trying to get their political opponents thrown off of the ballots. They tried to do that here in Arizona with two candidates, Andy Biggs and Paul Gosar, two House of Representative candidates. They tried to do it with Mark Fincham. I think he's running for Secretary of State here. They're basically saying these guys are insurrectionists because of what happened on January 6th. And they're making the argument that they can use the 14th Amendment, which has a little clause in there that's a disqualification clause that says if you engage in activities against the country, you're disqualified. And these were part of the Reconstruction Amendments that came out 13th, 14th, and 15th after the Civil War. And so they're very important laws and rules, and the Democrats are trying to sort of exploit those to say that anybody who is involved with J6 should be thrown off the ballots and disqualified. And a judge in Arizona, a federal judge, was that a federal case? I'm not sure if it was or not. It was a Superior Court case, I believe. Yeah, it was Superior Court, so it was not federal. But the judge came out and said, no, it doesn't apply here. Congress, if they don't want a particular group on the ballot, like, for example, the KKK, then they have to pass laws to that effect. You don't, as a private citizen, have the civil right to come in and file a lawsuit making those claims. Road Trek Girl says, these are many of the same arguments I heard in similar cases against Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia. It was surprised to hear uncivil law say on the Marjorie Taylor Greene matter, it was up to Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger. I haven't been following that one as closely, and I don't know if there was a ruling on that one yet. I know that she just gave testimony, but I don't think that there was actually an outcome yet. MJ says, thanks, Rob. Great show as always. Good to see you, MJ. Thanks for the support. We have Deborah Yunker. This was yesterday. I got some of these yesterday, but I didn't do the show. All the GOP congressmen and women are going to have to go through this because the left is losing their minds. Also commenting on Gosar. We had Bull Gator talking on the last headline, says, the Biden admin violates any law they disagree with, starting with the border, Ukraine, CDC overstepping. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Appreciate you, Bull Gator team. Some comments on this comment. Texas Beast saying, so a handful of Congress members trying to dictate what a private corporation does? Is this a problem? Zulu says, I agree that our government should be able to dictate how businesses run themselves. Of course, it will be important to remember that's what we wanted. Welcome aboard. Zulu's always got a little bit of sarcasm there. I think that's what that is. He has another one, says, I like where your head's at. If anyone ever mentions that state control is a short-sighted, psychotic, slippery slope proposition, you'll know you're right on track because they're scared. Another comment from John Penn says, we delisted several Chinese corporations because they don't play lawfully and fairly in our country. Do you think the USA Corps get a pass because they are homegrown? Twitter, which is effectively a public utility, violating our basic constitutional laws. Yeah, they are. They are using an exception. It's sort of this private entity exception to the base civil liberties that we have. And it doesn't feel like that's appropriate to say we live in America, and as American citizens that pay taxes, we enjoy all of these rights afforded to us in the social contract under which we live. But if that contract is essentially meaningless because all of the institutional entities that actually run things don't provide or uphold or maintain those same baseline standards, well, what good are the baseline standards? What good is the First Amendment if you actually can't communicate anywhere? Because on Twitter, you're banned. On Facebook, you're banned. On YouTube, you're banned. I guess you can go out on your street and shout from the rooftop. But the government also locked you in your homes for most of the pandemic. So you are pretty much limited. Last comment here, good comment from Bonnie Speck, says, the solution to misinformation is more information, not censorship. And that's exactly the right answer. And those, my friends, are the headlines for the day. I want to thank you for those great comments, for sharing the stories over on Locals. I do appreciate your support wherever you decide to support the show. And if you are somebody who enjoyed the content today, I'd really appreciate it if you gave us a like before you got out of here. And if you know somebody who might enjoy the channel, invited them to come check us out. And if you're not already subscribed, there's a red button on YouTube. Would love it if you press that before you got out of here, because I look forward to seeing you on the next one.